Hey, it's God's comic Brad Stine. Here's a question I need you to think about. Is it actually possible to shove a belief down somebody's throat? We use the term all the time, but can you actually shove a belief down somebody's throat? Talk about it down below. Listen to what I have to say, and let's see if we can get a little interesting conversation going without shoving anybody's belief down anybody's throat. You know, there's a new trend I noticed a couple of years ago, and I noticed it because that's my job, to do things for you. And it simply gains steam the further the left demands Americans implement its policies. Keep in mind that leftism has constantly used a phrase flippantly that not only didn't apply to the accused, but literally only applied to the accuser. That phrase was, "Don't shove your beliefs down my throat." If you think of what would actually entail to literally shove anything down someone's throat, it conjures up images of medieval torture techniques where a funnel was literally shoved into a person's throat and liquid was poured in until the hapless victim either suffocated or swallowed it until their stomach burst. But shoving something down someone's throat can only be done when someone is forced to consume something against their will. In the case of an idea shoved down your throat, the metaphor completely breaks down. Someone tries to pour something into you and you either ignore it, walk away, or regurgitate back your own perspective, then nothing was shoved down your throat at all. Just the opposite, in fact. It was completely rejected. Meanwhile, to claim the premise that having to hear something you don't want to, but then demand someone hear your side instead and to accept it or be banished from society or at the least shamed, is to reach new levels of obstinance in regards to being oblivious to your own sin. But the use of language has always been the ultimate use of control, since whomever controls the language of a people controls the people. The dissemination of ideas and the demand for acceptance of such ideas, and equally worse, the banning of dissent, is the equivalence of intellectual slavery, as it only allows you to engage in it if your master so allows. Because I am such an ardent champion of the First Amendment, it used to be an interesting exercise for me to try and formulate how it might be possible for someone to destroy religious liberties in America. I emphasize religious liberties as opposed to the other First Amendment rights because it was the first as well as the most important. Not because I'm a Christian, mind you, but instead see it as the meta-narrative to the rest of free speech. The religious component represents your most sacred possession as a free agent, your right to conscience. You get to not only think, communicate, and believe what you choose, but more importantly, practice it as such in public and private. As far as I could imagine, there was no back door to destroying this right until I started hearing the prefaces being used in defining certain people's discussions in regards to moral behaviors. Because transcendent morals can only come from a transcendent source, those with deeply held religious beliefs are taught certain behaviors are outside God's created order and thus are sinful and deleterious to the culture. It was then that I got my first clue as to where the culture was going when I heard leftists utter these words in regards to certain religious objections to certain behaviors. They said this: "I'm not going to allow your religion to be used as a smokescreen for bigotry." Suddenly, the strategy was apparent. Make people's personal behaviors more important, more sacred than God's moral instructions to us. Since some don't believe in God, then you can't hold the religious objections against them, and voila, your sacred right to practice your religion is now redefined as bigotry. Not a different point of view morally, but literally defining your moral beliefs as, are you ready for this, immoral. In other words, the left has begun the devastating process of forcing their amoral perspective into cultural shaming and ultimately the loss of reputation, jobs, and freedom. So you're actually existentially affected by it, whether you like it or not. So their belief is being shoved down your throat. The main attack, of course, is towards Christianity for two main reasons. Number one, Christianity is the foundation for the moral and cultural way the West has seen the world for a couple thousand years. Thus, if you want to redefine norms, you first must destroy the foundations that were already in place in order to topple the edifice, and thus be able to rebuild in your own image, or at least the latest leftist golden calf. And second, Christianity is at the top of the little heap in regards to the intersectionality graph of oppressors versus oppressed. Christianity is always oppressive. Every other religion is always oppressed. The fact that Christianity alone created the concept that all humans are made in the image of God, which set the stage for every form of human rights to be available, from women's rights, children's rights, ending of slavery, and the end of putting one's ethnicity above another, notwithstanding they were going to use the commodity given to them, justice to all equally, derived from Christianity, as a cudgel to dismantle Christianity. Now, the very word Christian is used as a pejorative, like Christian nationalist or right-wing Christian, to now mean a catch-all phrase to define anything and everything that is bigoted, hateful, and intolerant. Can they prove their case, by the way? They don't have to. When was the last time you saw a leftist caught red-handed in a scandal or crime being prosecuted? Simply doesn't happen. They're immune to convictions, to reciprocity, and even to criticism. This is literally the greatest threat to liberty in the history of the U.S. One group has not only gained all power, all dissemination of information, all censorship capabilities towards those they disagree with, but are immune from prosecution. Whether you like it or not, unless there is an absolute relentless attack and destruction of this evil inequity, you will have no choice but to swallow what they're distributing or be destroyed. That's what it feels like, to literally have something shoved down your throat. Time for a universal regurgitation, my friends. Not a pretty metaphor to imagine, but true. Remember, this is God's comic Brad Stine, and PC Free is your only shot at liberty. Hey, you are my awakened warriors. If you're watching this, it means that you were one of the beginnings of the Awakened 1000. That is the people that are actually being part of seeing the big picture of what I'm doing. You know, it's not just Brad Stine Has Issues. It's not just my Brad Stine Show podcast. It's not just my live events at comedy clubs and churches. I'm trying to say that conservatives and Christians will not be silenced. And we have to take a back door to get in because, as you know, they do kind of silence us all over social media. But I'm not going to give up with the fight. I think the God I believe in has sent me on a mission, and he sent you to go along and help me. There's a lot of free content out there, by the way. Would you do me a favor? Share it and try to drive people this direction. As long as you're here every month, I'll continue to try to make you laugh, inspire you, and also defend what you hold sacred. That's what I'm here for. You can help me. Also, when you see me in your town, or you want me in your town, let me know. I'll come out there, and we will do some damage for the kingdom. Thank you for being the beginnings of this ministry that has just begun to fight. I appreciate it, guys.